to Kevin Canessa, the Northeast producer of the Sid Rosenberg Show on Shovio, the webmaster for SidRosenberg.com. My main man. I see the balls across the nose. Sid Rosenberg Show T-shirt right behind him in the new setup for 2010. Kevin Canessa. Kevin, how are you, pal?
Okay, Sydney. How are you? Happy New Year, brother.
Happy New Year to you. The New Year went great, and then yesterday the Giants went out there and not just lost to Minnesota, but humiliated themselves and really ruined the end of my New Year's holiday. But these things happen, and now you have to move on.
It's funny you say that because I thought you would be nonchalant about last afternoon's game. I had a showcast yesterday, and Rodzilla, every time, it was during the Giants game actually, and every time the Vikings would score a touchdown, Rodzilla would type in the chat room, "Oh God, poor Sid, poor Sid, poor Sid." And I said, "Poor Sid my ass, he doesn't give a shit about this." But apparently it did bother you. I'm surprised that a meaningless game like that would have bothered you as much as it apparently did.
Well, I'll tell you why. First of all, very funny message here from Butch. Nice product placement, Kevin, with the Sid Rosenberg Show T-shirt behind you, which is an excellent job out of you. It's not the fact that they lost the game. You're right. Right, the Starbucks, yes. It's not the fact that they lost the game. He did. I know he paid for that. They couldn't have made the playoffs anyway. Even with a victory over Minnesota, Kevin, you're right. The game meant nothing. My problem is this team quit. And when any team quits in any sport, they quit against Carolina 2 weeks ago. They totally quit in that game yesterday. They never showed up on either side of the football. The offense scored 7 points when the Vikings were giving them yardage. The defense gave up 44 points 5 times this year. The Giant defense gave up 40 or more. So it wasn't the fact that the Giants lost, because even with a victory, they weren't going to make the playoffs. But the way the team has quit the last 2 weeks really makes me angry. And you heard what I said today to Mike Florio from ProFootballTalk.com. If they fired the whole coaching staff today, I'd be fine with that. Now, they're not going to do that because Tom Coughlin is only 2 years removed from beating the undefeated Patriots and winning a Super Bowl. So Coughlin's going to be back and Jerry Reese is going to be back. But I am telling you, from what I saw the last 2 weeks, if they fired everybody as a Giant fan, I'd be fine with that.
You're also the fan of a team in the New York Mets who, 2 years after the Mets were removed from a World Series appearance, also fired their manager in Bobby Valentine. And if you recall, I know it's two different sports, Sid, but if you think back to that 2002 season when that team absolutely quit on Bobby Valentine in 2002. There were only a couple of games out of first place at the end of 2001, as you recall, and in 2002 it was just a complete disgrace and a complete debacle. So I wouldn't be all that surprised if something like that happened too either. And you know what? And when it happens that a team quits on its coach, I don't want that coach there. I think the same thing happened with the Rangers last year with Tom Rennie. I don't mean to keep comparing to different sports. I'm just thinking of some of the more recent examples of teams that have quit on their coaches. And I don't know. I wonder if Tom Coughlin has absolutely lost the team, because he, in his press conference, was as bitter and nasty as he's ever been when he had that line, don't write about that. And I forget exactly what he was talking about. Then he said, just blame the coach. It's always the coach's fault. It's always my fault. So just write about that in the papers. He was like yelling and screaming. I don't know if you saw that. So I don't know what the deal is. I really don't know what the deal is. And it's well,
let me just say this. There's a little different. It's a little different between him and Valentine in that, yes, Valentine got the Mets to the NLCS in 1999. They lost to Atlanta. He did get the Mets to the World Series in 2000, but they lost. You know, if Bobby Valentine beats the Yankees in 2000 and they win the World Series, maybe he's not gone after 2002. And like you said, he did lose that team. You know, Zeal and Piazza and all these guys are going nuts. The difference with Coughlin is he won this thing 2 years ago. He didn't get there and lose. He won it, and he won it in epic proportion, because obviously the Patriots were trying to make history being the first team ever to go 19-0. So not only did he win the Super Bowl, but he won the Super Bowl in a year where there were zero expectations for the Giants, and he beat a team that was looking for perfection. So it's a little different in that Coughlin won it, and Bobby Valentine did not.
But he was also one miracle catch away from losing that Super Bowl too.
I know, but he won. I know, but it doesn't matter. You know, it Once you're 100% right, and lots of Super Bowls come down to that. Roger Staubach was one Jackie Smith drop away from beating Terry Bradshaw and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Scott Norwood was one 48-yard field goal away from beating the Giants in Super Bowl 25. So lots of Super Bowls come down to one magnificent play or one lucky play or one bad play. It doesn't matter. In the end, Coughlin won it 2 years ago, and Bobby Valentine did not do that. Now, again, he's not going to get fired now, but I will say this. He starts next year on the hot seat. If this team does not make the playoffs next year or has to bow out in embarrassing fashion early in the playoffs, I don't think Coughlin's back in 2 years.
Well, here's the bottom line, too. As much of as a Giant fan as I've become, thanks to you, more so now than ever, here's the bottom line. I'm very, very excited about the Jets being in the playoffs, and I don't, it's weird because I don't know if you would find this the same. I know Joe Benigno probably wouldn't feel this way, but I find it different, and perhaps it's because I'm more of a casual football fan when the Jets make the playoffs than I do when it's, say, Mets and Yankees, for example, or Rangers Devils. I'm actually very excited that the Jets are in the playoffs, and quite frankly, I wouldn't mind seeing them win the AFC. I wouldn't mind seeing them get to the Super Bowl and even perhaps winning it, just so that we don't have to hear whining, nagging, annoying Jet fans anymore, bitch and complain about it being 41 fucking years. So, hey, listen, as far as I'm concerned, let the Jets win the fucking thing this year, get it over with, and then they can go on another 40-year dry run.
But you and I did talk today about Alan Sniffen. Now, for the guys up in New York, there are some people obviously here in Miami watching the show right now, and we even have a guy on the West Coast. So not everybody is in New York, but for the guys up in New York, you know that they've got the New York City radio message board, something that most guys in the business read. And what I've come to find is, I always thought that was just like us reading that, guys in the business, but it turns out that people who are not in the business, just the radio junkies out there, they read it too. So Alan Sniffen was always a guy that was very nice to me. In fact, you may remember just a couple of months ago when the rumors were I was heading back to New York to work with Mike Francesa, those were more than rumors that went up the CBS channel and literally fell at Leslie Moonvis's desk. Alan Sniffen was on that New York City message board, as you know, Kevin, a couple of months ago saying, bring Sid back. He's the right guy for the job. Him and Mike would be great together. So I really don't have a huge problem with Alan Sniffen. He has always been very nice to me, which is weird. I don't know why, because it doesn't seem like I'm the type of guy he'd be nice to. He's tough on Craig Carton, but he's good to me. But with that said, I know he has a tendency to be a douchebag to other people in the business, and I guess a couple of our guys here have attempted to put the Shovio stuff, which is gaining more publicity now, nice story that Leslie sent me earlier today, on the New York City message board, and he keeps ripping these things down. We're having trouble promoting Shovio on the New York City message board, so I know that you want to kill Sniffen here, but the one thing you have to admit is, for some reason, I don't know why, even up to a couple of months ago, he's been pretty nice to me.
Alan Sniffen has been very, very good to you, and unfortunately, you're one of the few people to whom he's nice. He has been merciless.
Well, I wonder why that is. I wonder.
Well,
why do you think that is?
I think he's a misogynist. I think he doesn't think women have a place in radio, and part of it is that you're a man. You're also Jewish, and I believe that has a lot to do with his fervor for you. And I like that. I think we should take advantage of that. But I'll tell you this. Jerry Barmish, who wrote this piece for the Examiner.com, actually is a very good self-promoter. And Alan lets him self-promote for some reason. He's the only person he lets self-promote. So Jerry put up a link today with a link to the story and a little note about Shovio. I will be very interested to see whether or not Alan keeps it up. And in the past, Vanilla Boy, who you know, who has been a
sure,
periodic visitor to the Sid Rosenberg show, was posting things on the show, and believe it or not, he actually was banned from posting on the New York City radio message board by Sniffen because he was persistent with putting stuff off about Shovio. Now, here's where I think Sniffen has the biggest issue with Shovio. This is a man, and a lot of the regulars there, and I don't want to knock them for it, but there's a centralized group of people who still think FM radio is a place where people choose to go to listen to music, when you and I both know that FM radio music is dying, and at some point it's going to come to an end.
As far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm concerned, the day that Scott Muni died was the day that my FM radio music died. I mean, I listen to music now on satellite once in a while. I don't listen to Elvis Duran, even though he's syndicated down here in the mornings, and the stuff on Z100 or Y100. I never listen to those two cocksuckers who are very mean to me, Scott Shannon and Todd Pettengill on WPLJ. So the day that Scott Muni died was the day that FM music died for me.
Well, here's the thing, and I kind of agree with you, too. I mean, it was around that time where I stopped listening to FM radio, when you don't need to listen to commercials, you know, and I think it's got to be a tough sell for salespeople in the FM music stations. That notwithstanding, my sense is that Alan looks at Shovio as a non-factor yet, because he has acknowledged some other forms of radio, per se. And he's starting to catch on now with the fact that I can take this iPhone here and listen to the radio anytime I want to. And that's what I do. You know, like, I haven't turned on a radio in my home in years. I turn on the car radio because that's the only thing that's there. But if I'm listening to your show in the car, I'm listening through the phone. So he's still at a point where he doesn't fully accept alternate means of radio, and I think it's going to take him a while.
Okay, fine. Then here's my problem. But here's my problem then. Okay, here's my problem with Alan. Okay, whether he accepts this form of technology or not doesn't matter. Again, we both agree he's been very, very nice to me, and there's no question that even though I've been out in New York on a full-time basis for 5 years, that my name is still very synonymous with New York radio. I still have a very large, loyal audience up there, and Alan Sniffen just wrote that a couple of months ago when they were rumored to bring me back to work with Mike Francesa. So forgetting about whether he likes the technology or he believes this is the case, based upon what he has said about me, why not at least say, look, I don't think this thing is going to make it. I don't even know how this fucking thing works, blah, blah, blah. But to Leslie Gold's credit, she hired Sid Rosenberg. He was a big star at BN. Imus, blah, blah, blah. Mentioned the other guys on the network as well. I mean, I am on that board quite a bit, so why not at least take the talent that's here at Shovio and work with that, forgetting about the technology for 2 minutes? Why can't Sniffen do that?
Well, obviously, it's pretty clear he's got a chip on his shoulder for Leslie. I don't know why, other than my theory about him not with women in the industry. And my sense is he's taking an all-or-nothing approach here. If he can't promote everybody because he doesn't like everybody, he's not going to promote one person. So I think that's kind of the way he's going. What will be interesting, though, is in the next 24 hours, because usually about 7 or 8 o'clock, when he gets home from drilling teeth and doing root canals, don't forget he's a dentist by trade, when he gets home, that's when he starts reading the posts and yanking them down, not even considering that people spend time thinking these things up and preparing what to write, and then actually going ahead and writing them. So I want to see what happens in the next 24 hours, whether or not he keeps this up. If he keeps it up, I will back off completely. If he deletes this post, I am going to go on an all-out, I don't know what you'd call it. It's not a boycott. It's not a rampage. It's something. And what happened at MikeFrancesa.com, I want to make sure happens to NYRMB.com. So to everybody out there tonight, if you don't have a login to the New York Radio message board, I will be happy to give you mine. I would like you all to go to nyrmb.com and respond to Jerry Barnish's post positively, of course. This sounds like really communist, but it's really not. If you feel so inclined, that is. And if you need to log in, just drop me an email and I will send you my login and password, which you can use, but you'll probably suspend thereafter. But if you are inclined to respond positively, inundate the board with posts, then he'll almost be impossible for him to pull them down. It's NYRMB as in boy.com, the acronym for New York Radio Message Board. So that's that.
Very good. Very good. It's funny too. One more media thing up in New York, and then we'll move to one more topic, and then we'll jump out. But talking about New York and the message board and the media up there, and I'm on a show in Washington D.C. on Saturday mornings. A kid by the name of Sean Sharif. He does an afternoon show for ESPN Radio in Baltimore, but Mark Chernoff gave him the morning show at WJFK, which is a big station, 106.7 FM in Washington D.C. And he brings me on every Saturday morning at 10:30. He calls up the wake up call with Sid Rosenberg. So I come on Saturday. Happy New Year, and Shanahan's going to the Redskins. By the way, Mike Shanahan is in D.C., and he will be named the head coach of the Redskins here, I would think, in the next 24 hours. And he goes, hey, by the way, how about that, you're back in the papers this week. Now, I got to be honest, I had no idea. I know that a couple of weeks ago, Phil Mushnick mentioned my name, as he always does. And I'm real happy, by the way, that the last chapter in my book is called Everybody's a Critic, Even the Assholes. And the very first sentence, I described Phil Mushnick as a quote-unquote piece of shit. That's how I describe him in my book, and I'm happy about that because it comes to my attention. I don't even know about this. This is what this guy is telling me in D.C., by the way, that the New York Post writers, Mike Vaccaro, Phil Mushnick, like 6 or 7 writers, did a end-of-the-year piece last week, and they talked about the biggest stories of the decade. So obviously Mushnick went to the biggest media stories of the decade, and he went with the 10 worst, I guess. And there I am once again, not for Kylie Minogue, not for Venus or Serena Williams. He says, congratulations, I'm being ironic and sarcastic, of course, to WFAN for playing a promo with Sid Rosenberg's voice, where Sid is bragging because he found out 2 hours before everybody else that Don Baylor had cancer. Now, listen, maybe that was true, maybe it wasn't true. If I did find out, I certainly wasn't bragging or happy about it. But after 10 years and all of the well-publicized fuck-ups and problems, Mushnick finds something that nobody else even remembers, but again, just a chance to shit on my face when I'm out of that town for 5 fucking years. So you may be angry with Alan Sniffen. To me, Alan Sniffen is Mother Teresa compared to this cocksucker, Phil Mushnick.
Cocksucker's a light word. Phil Mushnick is a man who has been in the same position for, 30 years or whatever it is now, and he has accomplished nothing. His whole life is designed to destroy other people's lives. The man doesn't know how to
Four
give a
people specifically. When you say other people's lives, 4 people that he's been very hard on the last 10 years: Sid Rosenberg, Mike Francesa, Don Imus, and Craig Carton. Every single week, he'll take some fucking weekend guy at FAN who's a nobody, and he'll tout him. He's the next Marv Albert. He's the next this. He's the next that. Why? Because that guy doesn't pose a threat. But anybody who has had a modicum of success, including Mike and Don, who are hugely successful in the New York area and all across the country, anybody that's had that, say what you want about Craig Carton. Maybe you hate his guts. Maybe you think he sucks. Here are the facts. For the first time ever, WFAN has a radio show that's #1 in the mornings, and Craig Carton is the voice you hear a lot more than Boomer Esiason. Point being, anybody who's had a modicum of success, that motherfucker can't stand.
And part of it is also goes back to, I'm sure he is a frustrated wannabe broadcaster. I'm sure he wanted more gigs on.
Well, he was on. He was on. He was on the Fan many years ago. He was on, and he was out after that. His Wikipedia page lists Sid as a target. Reno's talking about. Is that Mushnick's Wikipedia page? It probably is, because as I said, he comes after me quite often, so it would not surprise me. Yeah, there you go. You see, even on his own Wikipedia page, Phil Mushnick has me designated as a target. I mean, what the fuck is that? Yeah. I'm out of New York for 5 years.
Okay, but just remember a couple of things about this. I think you got to put it into perspective. Number one, you didn't know it, I didn't know it, nobody else here mentioned it, so that means that people aren't reading him. Number two, the newspaper industry is dying, so he's going to be out of a job at some point, because the first one to go, unfortunately, in the sports department, the Washington Times, for example, just eliminated its sports department, and today was the first edition without. Yeah, so think of it this way. If you got to keep a sports department together for an online newspaper, and you got to start making cutbacks because you're going to be making less money, where are you going to start? Where are you going to start?
Oh God, I'm sorry. I started laughing because your buddy Reno said Vince McMahon too, and there's a story. The very first chapter of my book, I talk about how Time Magazine, after the Venus and Serena thing, thank you, Reno, for putting up the Mushnick Wikipedia page right there in the chat room. Time Magazine, hello, Richie Hartman, Happy New Year. They used to have the Loser of the Month. I talked about this on this show before. And sandwiched in between Osama bin Laden, who's killed millions of people, and Milosevic, who's killed millions of people, was me. I was the Loser of the Month. And it just seems so ridiculous. It seems so ridiculous. And then your buddy Reno just told me that I am a target of Phil Mushnick as well as Vince McMahon, who, of course, has a sport where his wrestlers are all juiced up and killing their kids and their wives and fucking, drugs and drinking and low lives and all that shit. And he's got me in the same boat as Vince McMahon. So that kind of brought me back to the Time Magazine story, if you will.
So here's what we're gonna do then. We're gonna resurrect that stuff, but we're gonna do the bashing now. Here's what we're gonna do. Every time Kevin Canessa comes on with Sid Rosenberg, which is every day at 5:15 or so, about a minute each day is going to be something nasty about Phil Mushnick from this day on for the next month. Okay, for the month of January.
All right.
I have declared Monday. The 1 minute of Kevin Canessa's discussion with Sid Rosenberg bash the fuck out of Phil fucking Mushnick. That's what we're gonna do here for 1 minute a day for the month of January.
I love
that
it.
helps
I think
Kevin
it's,
Murray
I think
too.
it's great.